Welcome to the work session of the Board of Trustees, the Village of Port Jefferson. Calling to order this meeting at 5 o'clock, right on time. Clerk Perillo, would you like to confirm the presence of a quorum?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mayor Shepro?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Giuliano?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Laux?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Hill?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Ugrinsky? Present. Thank you. Attorney Moran and Treasurer Gafka are with us as well.
Okay, thank you. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Tonight we have a presentation from our attorney, Stephen Leventhal. Attorney Leventhal is our ethics counsel, and we asked him tonight to come in and work through with this board for awareness and update and sort of an in-service educational process on freedom of information law. Because there have been some emails going back and forth internally where a FOIL, Freedom of Information Law request will come in, and there seems to be some confusion about who is responsible for responding and what the time frame is for response. I note Trustee Laux' email back to the person who was requesting the information to verify the time frame, and I thought that was certainly a sign that we needed a little bit of education about the freedom of information. So I asked the clerk, who is our Freedom of Information Records Access Officer, to organize this with Attorney Leventhal, and he agreed, and he put together a short presentation, and we'll be able to ask questions and respond, and he'll be able to respond knowledgeably. And so, yeah, I thought it'd be really helpful for our governance process. So without further ado, Stephen, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. I don't think the statute of limitations has passed on wishing you all a Happy New Year. So, Happy New Year. I served, you may remember that I served for a dozen years as village attorney for a village in Nassau County, for 4 years as village attorney for another Nassau County village. And I have represented municipalities throughout the state in regulatory matters, including compliance with the Freedom of Information Law and the Open Meetings Law. So I have put together a very brief program tonight, and then I will be glad to answer any questions. So the Freedom of Information Law is actually a chapter contained in the Public Officers Law. That's where to find the actual statute in the Public Officers Law. And it was adopted in 1967 as a response to the scandals of the McCarthy era. The bill was the Freedom of Information Act I'm talking about, the federal version of FOIL. It was signed into law by President Lyndon Johnson holding his nose. And the McCarthy that I'm referring to is not Eugene McCarthy of that era. It's Joseph McCarthy of the 1950s. So the first enactment was by the federal government in '67, and that was followed about 10 years later by the state of New York in adopting the Freedom of Information Law, and it was also a response to a scandal, the scandal that time being Watergate. So it was a post-Watergate reform. And the law, the Freedom of Information Law and the Open Meetings Law, both are expressions of the fundamental value that we place in New York State on openness and transparency in government. In order for a democracy to function, the constituents must have information about what their government is doing in order to be in a position to hold their elected officials accountable. So that's the purpose of the Freedom of Information Law. Government officers and employees are required by the Arts and Cultural Affairs Law to maintain records of their official activities, and those records must be maintained by the municipality for as long as they're needed for the conduct of the business of the office. And in addition, the Department of Education of the state of New York has promulgated regulations that apply to local municipalities regarding the length of time with which they need to maintain records. In fact, there's a schedule. If you have a particular record, you can look it up on the schedule, and that schedule will tell you the number of years that that record must be maintained. And under the Freedom of Information Law, there is a presumption of access. We start with the presumption that all village records are available for public inspection and copying. In fact, that statement is true with the exception of two categories of records. First, records that are exempt from disclosure by federal or state law. If either federal or state law has made a record confidential as a matter of law, it is exempt from the Freedom of Information Law. What's an example of a record that federal law makes confidential? Well, it doesn't necessarily apply here in the village of Port Jefferson, but you all have heard, I'm sure, of HIPAA. HIPAA is a federal law that makes your personal medical records confidential, and it's a violation of that law for a healthcare worker or an insurance company worker to disclose your personal medical information without your consent. What's an example of information that state law makes confidential? Well, the one that comes immediately to my mind is the attorney-client privilege. Privileged records are confidential, and the attorney is legally bound by that duty of confidentiality. The confidentiality belongs to the client, not to the attorney, and can be waived only by the client and not by the attorney, except under the most extraordinary circumstances, like an ongoing crime. But that's an example of information that state law makes confidential. So that's the first broad category of information that is exempt from FOIL, information that federal or state law mandates as confidential. But there's another category of information that the village is granted the discretion in its judgment to withhold from public disclosure, to withhold from public inspection and copying. I'm going to go through several of those categories a couple of slides later, but these are categories of information which, if requested, the village information access officer must review and make a determination about whether that document will or will not be disclosed. And that determination, of course, like all exercises of judgment by a municipality, is subject to judicial review in an Article 78 proceeding. So the Freedom of Information Law imposes a statutory timeline. Yes, sir.
Are there examples of that one?
Of which one? Sure, I'm going to go through several categories, but an example would be interagency or intra-agency communications that are not factual, statistical data, but expressions of opinion. That's an example. Information which, as defined by the statute, would result in an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy if disclosed. Collective bargaining, negotiations, law enforcement activities, those are all examples. So, as I said, the Freedom of Information Law imposes a statutory timeline for compliance. The request must be acknowledged by the village within 5 days of receipt. And generally what that request says is, we've received, what that response says is, we've received your request. Here is a date approximately 20 days from now, on which, by which we will either comply with your request, tell you that your request is denied, or that tell you that we're diligently engaging in a search for the records and need some reasonable additional time. So that is a date within 20 days following the 5-day acknowledgement. Then, as I said, if the village is unable after 20 days to comply with the request and needs additional time, they must notify the person making the request of that fact, and then they can take some additional time, but it must be a reasonable length of time. The failure to comply with these statutory timeframes constitutes a constructive denial. That word "construct" is a typo. It should be constructive. It's a constructive denial. So if this time period passes, 5 days, 20 days pass, the applicant has not heard from the village, they can treat that as a denial of their request and then go to the next step in the process. And the next step following a denial, whether it's a constructive denial or an actual express denial, the next step is an appeal. And the applicant has a right to an administrative appeal. That means an appeal to the village appeals officer, which is the village attorney. An administrative appeal can be filed, but it must be filed within 30 days of the denial. If it is, the village has 10 business days to respond to the appeal. If after that administrative process is finished, if a document is still denied, if the member of the public is denied access to a particular record, that's when that member of the public would be free, if they wish, to seek a judicial remedy. Yes.
In a case where there's a request that requires maybe more staff time than is available, and so would take, say, 3 months
Right.
to respond to, like, how is that handled?
Sure, we're going to go through that in a moment, and if you don't mind, I'll rely upon the slides, because, okay. So, the village clerk is the village's record access officer, and it's the village clerk who has the authority and the duty to coordinate agency responses to FOIL requests. Only the village clerk does, unless there's more than one records access officer designated. For example, in the state, as large and diverse an agency, an entity as the state of New York, there are different departments and different agencies that have their own records access officer. That would not be the case in the village.
Ms. Leventhal, if there's an occasion where village records are released by someone other than the records officer, my friend who works in building decided to release building files or whatever, would that employee be subject to discipline?
I would say so. I would say yes.
And if they went a further step and released records because they were unsure, because they're not the records officer, that contained confidential information or investigatory stuff or stuff that would be privileged and not subject to FOIL, that would also require some level of further discipline.
Right. As we'll discuss in a moment, the village code of ethics, like the New York General Municipal Law, makes it an ethics violation to make unauthorized use or disclosure of confidential village information, and the village code contains a definition of confidential information. It is information similar to the definition that you saw a moment ago. It's information that is either prohibited from disclosure by federal or state law, or information that the village has the discretion to withhold and has lawfully exercised the discretion to withhold. Now, when I said in answer to your question a moment ago that a person who discloses information without the authority to do so would be subject to discipline, I think it's always helpful to have clear written policies that justify any discipline. Okay. So, in response to a FOIL request, the Freedom of Information law does not require the village to create a document in response to a FOIL request. If the document exists and it is subject to FOIL, it must be produced. But the village doesn't have to go creating a document. Furthermore, similarly, Freedom of Information law is about existing records. It's not about asking questions and getting answers. That's a procedure completely foreign to the Freedom of Information law, which is just about documents or records. The village must create and maintain records of votes, lists of names, public office addresses of officers, lists of names, public offices, and public office addresses, titles, and salaries of village officers and employees. And the village must also contain what is called a subject matter list. A subject matter list is a list of the records that the village maintains. It's not a list that is detailed by each individual particular record. It's a list that's maintained by category. So a category might be building department files containing applications to land use boards, or containing applications and decisions on those applications, that sort of thing. So it's a list of categories, not a list of individual itemized documents. So an applicant can request that a record be produced in a particular format. If it can reasonably be done, then the village must do it. And if an outside professional service is required in order to comply with the request, then that cost can be passed along to the applicant. And in order for the village to grant a FOIL request, the document that is sought must be reasonably described. The description has to be sufficient for the village to know what they're being asked for and go find it. So there must be a reasonable description, and a failure to provide a reasonable description would be a legitimate basis for denying a FOIL request. So the request can come in any form. The village has a prepared form for making FOIL requests, but an applicant is not required to use that form. The applicant is well advised to do so because that form has been designed in order to give the village the information that it needs to comply with the request. But so while that is really the best practice to use that form, an email, a letter, any other kind of written request is sufficient to satisfy the requirements of FOIL.
Question?
Yes.
If an applicant, a FOIL requester, presents a form to the records access officer in person, and the records access officer says, "Thank you, I've received that," does that satisfy the acknowledgement?
The acknowledgement should be in writing. Whether in a particular case a judge would decide that these facts are sufficient so that the village was not at fault, that's a different question. But certainly the village clerk or other records access officer should provide a written acknowledgement so that there's a record of the fact that they've done that. And by the way, now that I've said so that there's a record that that's happened, it brings to mind the fact that FOIL requests are foilable, because when a FOIL request comes in, there's a record in the possession of the village. And by the way, if they ever really wanted to relieve the burden on a local municipality that this law represents, and really while its purpose is excellent, openness, transparency, we all believe in that in a democracy, yet it strains the resources of municipalities, whether they're large or small. It's a very burdensome thing. So if they ever really wanted to help out a local municipality, they would adopt the freedom of information law.
Well,
So-
one more follow-up
Yes.
to that, because I think the form in the village has a location for the signature of the records access officer. If the signature is intact and the document is returned, does that constitute an
Absolutely, that
acknowledgement?
would be a written acknowledgement
Okay.
of receipt, I
All
would say,
right.
yes, for sure. So, again, not only does an applicant not have to use the village's prescribed form, but they can be anonymous. Once again, the problem with choosing to be anonymous in your FOIL request is what's the village to do if they're uncertain about what records are being sought and needs clarification? And of course, even an anonymous request must have a location to send the records to or an email address to respond to. Okay, so now we're going to get back to those exemptions that we were talking about. We already mentioned that federal or state law makes certain types of records confidential. I mentioned the attorney-client communications, mental health records, social security numbers, certain information about school children. You may remember that disciplinary records of police officers, until not long ago, were exempt from disclosure under the civil rights law. That has changed. Also, court records, while not confidential by statute, are not subject to FOIL because there's a separation of powers between the the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. So FOIL doesn't cover court records. Yes.
Can you elaborate on what constitutes court records?
Well,
Unless you already have the slide.
no, I don't. But the court maintains a file. Each case that the court has heard is contained in a court file. The accusatory instrument, any answers or defenses asserted, sometimes transcripts of hearings, a summons, evidence perhaps that was adduced at a trial or a hearing, photographs and such things. They can all be contained in a court file.
What about drafts?
Drafts, I'm afraid to say, as an attorney who likes my work product to be final and not in draft form, drafts are foilable.
What about drafts in the form of attorney-client privilege?
Well, attorney-client privileged documents are exempt from FOIL. And also remember that intra-agency and interagency communications are exempt unless they're statistical or factual in nature. And a document, by the way, may be partly exempt and partly not. There may be a communication from one village department to another that does contain statistical information, data, factual information. Well, the village would have the discretion to redact the information that it is authorized by law to withhold and then disclose the rest. And that could also conceivably be the case with an attorney-client communication. There may be some material in it that's privileged and some that's not. Okay. And remember, we're talking about categories of information that are subject to a discretionary denial. And they don't need to be denied twice, as the title of this slide may suggest. They can be denied only once. So we're talking about interagency or intra-agency materials that are not statistical or factual tabulations or data, instructions to staff that affect the public, final agency policies or procedures, or determinations rather, or external audits. The purpose of this exemption is to protect the deliberative process by ensuring that persons in the advisory roles are able to express their opinions freely to the agency decision makers. So interagency, intra-agency advice may be withheld. And information that would impair present or imminent contract awards or collective bargaining negotiations also may be withheld. trade secrets or records submitted by a commercial enterprise are based on information obtained from a commercial enterprise which would cause substantial injury to the competitive position of the subject enterprise. I remember when I was a village attorney, at one point we were grappling with an issue where someone had submitted a FOIL request for the architectural plans of someone else's home. And we were concerned about two things. We didn't want to give anyone a roadmap for burglarizing the home, to know where the security devices were and so forth. And secondly, we were concerned about one architect taking the work product of another and putting their stamp on it and using it for another project. So there really are situations in which you have to think hard about what the consequences, commercial consequences might be to someone. This category of unwarranted invasion of personal privacy, here are some examples. The employment application of a person who was not hired, home telephone numbers or personal cell phone numbers, medical information, public employee home addresses, lists of names and addresses of natural persons if used for solicitation or fundraising purposes. Also, when I was a village attorney, we would occasionally get, particularly prior to the election time, we would get a FOIL request for the tax roll, because the tax roll contains the name and address of every property owner in the village. And before disclosing names and addresses, the village can require that the applicant certify that the record will not be used for solicitation or fundraising purposes. And finally, I'm sure you will all be relieved to hear that mugshots can be withheld from public disclosure. So if the village does not have a responsive record and denies the request on that basis, that denial is not appealable. Upon payment of or offer to pay the required fee, the agency shall provide a copy of the records that it has and certify to the correctness of the copy if requested, or certify that it does not have possession of the record or that the record cannot be found after a diligent search. And the village can charge up to 25 cents per copy for records up to a 9 by 14 inch document. There is no charge for search or review time. In answer to the trustee's question earlier, you can't charge for the time that it takes you to search for the record or to review it. And you can charge the actual copying cost, but only if at least 2 hours are needed, and the time spent copying, but only if at least 2 hours are needed, and the rate is the hourly salary of the lowest paid agency employee with the skill required to do the copying. So searching you cannot charge for. Standing at the copy machine you can. If at least 2 hours of time are required to do it. You can charge for the actual cost of the storage device, such as those little thumb drives, if you produce the records on a storage device. And if agency IT is inadequate to produce the record, the actual cost of outside professional services to prepare a copy of the record may be passed along. As I said earlier, the rights of a member of the public under the Freedom of Information Law are enforced through an Article 78 proceeding. An Article 78 proceeding is basically a motion in court that says that the village has acted in a way that's arbitrary, capricious, and abusive, or an abuse of discretion. And so we were saying earlier that there are areas, these categories of information, which the statute gives the village the discretion to withhold. But the village is under an obligation, a legal obligation, not to abuse that discretion. An award of attorney's fees to the plaintiff is mandatory when the requester has substantially prevailed and the court finds that the agency had no reasonable basis for denying the access. and the court may, but is not required to award attorney's fees when the requester has substantially prevailed and the agency failed to respond within the statutory time. Finally, and this is the final slide, as I mentioned earlier, the Code of Ethics prohibits the unauthorized use or disclosure of confidential village information, and that is information that is made confidential by state or federal law, or information that the village has lawfully withheld from the public pursuant to the authority granted by the Open Meetings Law or the Freedom of Information Law. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. I think I'll move around to the front. Should I leave that on, perhaps? Somebody more electronically skillful than I can turn it on. Yes.
So just to sort of build on the outside professional services, in a situation, so as you know, there is legislative turnover, right? So in a situation where administration has come in and, essentially has done their best efforts at least tracking what has occurred since the administration has come in. Say it's a new clerk coming in, right, the records officer. How does one handle a request where the prior records may not be findable or unavailable? And by extension, is it then appropriate to engage someone to recreate some of that from, say, other types of records in order to satisfy the FOIL? So that's question one. Well, let me,
That's
yeah.
question 1A.
And I think you need the microphone, sorry. Oh, here.
Sure. Sure. Well, actually, that first question was a two-parter. The first part is the village is not obligated to produce a record that it cannot, with reasonable efforts, locate and produce. So if the record was never created, although it should have been, or if it was created and the records of a prior administration are in disarray, or if they've somehow disappeared, then that would be a legitimate basis for denial. The question number two, the second part of your question was, do you recall the?
Yeah, well, the second part of the question is just, how does one define like a reasonable FOIL request and one that could be construed as being a nuisance FOIL request, right?
Sure.
We're heading into an election year.
Right.
So it is likely that that could occur.
Right. I remembered the second part that I'd forgotten a second ago, and,
Okay.
and that is, should the documents somehow be recreated? Now, the village may wish to try to recreate records for its own use, but FOIL does not impose an obligation on the village to create a document. So if the document doesn't exist, that's the end of the village's obligation under FOIL. What you may choose to do for your own purposes of governing and having reliable records is a different matter. Now, how do you decide whether a request is reasonable? You remind me of something that a Supreme Court Justice, Potter Stewart, famously said when he was asked to define pornography. He said, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. So, obviously, there are an infinite number of factual scenarios. I've represented villages in which an individual is just filing request after an infinite number of, well, not infinite, but a very so burdensome a number of FOIL requests that it starts to become harassment rather than a legitimate use of the FOIL request. And if it's that extreme a case, and believe me, it must be very extreme to persuade a judge to issue a restraining order against someone from continuing to file those requests. But it's not unheard of for something like that to happen. And also, depending upon how burdensome and voluminous the request is, the village may need additional time. They may need additional professional services. Within the parameters of the law, it has the ability to obtain those services, certainly for the copying.
How about in a situation where you've got to recreate records that may originate, say, from court records, may be the only way to recreate them, right? I mean,
Well, under those
what would-
circumstances, you would have to make that request to the court. The fact that the Freedom of Information Law doesn't mandate that the court produce records doesn't mean that the court is prohibited from producing those records. So a request can be made to the court. I would do that through the court clerk.
Is the court clerk considered the records access officer for the court?
Well, the term record access officer wouldn't really apply because that's a creature of the Freedom of Information Law, and the Freedom of Information Law doesn't apply to the court.
Okay.
But I think and furthermore, in the court, there's one ultimate authority on all questions, and that is the judge. So to the extent that the judge has authorized the clerk to make those kind of determinations, then sure. But if not, if I were the court clerk, I would certainly go to the judge and get approval.
Okay.
Would intra or inter-agency cover, say, any situation that straddles, say, the village and Suffolk County Police?
Sure, that would be an interagency communication. Yep.
Brookhaven Township also?
Sure,
Uh-huh.
yep, yep, yep,
Thank you.
sure. Anybody else?
So bottom line is, the village shouldn't be creating a record to respond to a FOIL request.
The village is not obligated by the Freedom of Information Law to do that. What it may choose to do in a particular situation, for whatever reasons may arise, is a different matter.
Okay.
You may find that in a particular case, it's in the best interest of the village to do that, or it's in the public interest to do that, or there's some legitimate reason for doing it. But FOIL compliance, while very important and very legitimate, is also very burdensome on the village. So you don't want to take something that's burdensome and make it unnecessarily burdensome.
And one more clarification. There's a recessive memory I have from working at Stony Brook and the records access officer there and general counsel. One of the phrases that they used was, your request is not reasonably described.
Yes.
When would you use a response like that?
Well, the real test is whether the applicant has provided you with a description that is sufficient so that you know what they're asking you to produce and you can go look for it. If you know what it is they're seeking and you can go look for it, then that really is a sufficient description. It's a matter of whether you are able in good faith to respond to the FOIL request.
Is it one of those, I'll know it when I see it type answers again?
I would say so,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Yes.
As far as creating a record, I mean, a record might be electronic, so there might, so printing out something that's electronic is not creating a record, right? It's just.
Correct,
that's-
yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. But if someone says, here's my FOIL request, I want a list of every building inspector who has worked for the village for the last 10 years. Well, it's unlikely that the village has
a record that meets that description, and it's not obligated to create one.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Okay, thank
Very
you all.
informative.
Okay.
I'm looking to the clerk, because it's
It's Mr. Levithal's work product.
it's a record.
It is a record, and no problem. Thank you. Good night, everybody. Good night.
Thank you very much.
I recommend that we do that via PDF and not the actual PowerPoint
Sure.
presentation. Yeah.
Okay, now we are going into reports. So we'll start with trustee Giuliano.
Okay, thank you very much. Happy New Year to everyone here and everyone watching. As far as the Department of Public Works, the word is snow and ice, and they've been cleaning up and straightening up after the weak snow event. A small crew of workers were called out to sand and salt various roadways after the event. The DPW installed a speed table, or reinstalled, I should say, a speed table at Old Post Road West near the intersection of Dark Hollow Road and Old Post Road West. A sign was erected at the site, and the table was painted yellow to enhance visibility and to alert the motorists. The floor replacement at the building, 88 North Country Road, is being done by the restoration company. They've been replacing employees' office equipment, desks, etc., and getting it back into where it was before in preparation to move employees back into the building.
It's done.
It's done.
Not where it was before either.
Okay.
It's
But
it's
better.
much
Yes,
improved.
yes.
Yes.
Um,
One update I think that the clerk can provide about the move, the actual move. Is there one other thing pending for the mold testing or something like that?
Yes. We will be ordering a mold test just to ensure that it has all been remediated. We're confident that it has been, but we're
Just
ordering
to
a test.
put everybody's mind at
Yes.
rest. Good.
Yes.
And DPW has also conducted some minor tree work at various locations, limb tree trimming. Parks update, they will be removing the Dickens and the holiday lighting soon and getting ready for the next event. They're compiling a list of remaining kayaks. I don't know if they've submitted that. Okay, they're compiling a list of remaining kayaks that were left on the racks, and they're going to submit that to Sylvia. They secured the Tucker house, the doors and windows. Apparently there were openings and as a result of vandalism, so they reattached and resecured the Tucker house.
It was not vandalism. It
Okay.
was weather related.
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
it was not
Oh, that's
vandalism.
good. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to hear.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good.
Yes.
They repaired damaged fences at the Village Center and at East Beach and removed the windscreens over at the tennis court. As far as the various committees, most of them did not meet for the month of December, so I just have a list of when the next meetings will be. Committee on Coastal Erosion, next meeting is scheduled for January 16th at 6 p.m. at the lower level of the Port Jefferson Country Club. Committee is requesting a representative from Haydeck Engineering to come and to discuss their findings and, just have a discussion with the engineering firm. So I sent a request. I don't know how we go about getting them in to address the committee.
Well, it's my understanding that when we hired on Hayduck, that we would have to present a scope of work, or at least a detailed synopsis of what they would be doing, and then the board would need to approve that prior to the action.
And
If
I'm
I
not sure
remember
they're the
well.
engineer of record for that site anyway. It's GEI. Right?
Okay, they said Hayduck, but I think GEI is probably what they want to, yeah, speak to GEI to see, just to
But
get
it-
a background on what
Either-
was done.
Either way, we're going to get charged for it.
I know, that's the problem, I know.
So But we'll talk to the engineer to see what, if they can provide something, maybe it's in writing or a summary that
If they can
currently,
provide a summary,
it
that
might even
be-
exist. There
Okay.
might be a report, I know they do an annual report, and then they also provided some information for our grant writer for some additional requested material from the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA. So we'll find something
Okay.
that can be.
Sure, if there's some sort of summary or something,
Yeah,
just to
that is already paid for,
fill in.
I think.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, because we don't want to incur
Okay.
additional expenses. Parks and Rec Committee is meeting on Wednesday, the 15th at 6 PM. The CAC, Conservation Advisory Committee, is on the 21st at 7 PM. And the Tree Committee is also meeting on the 15th, but they're meeting at 7:30 PM. so.
Oh, Dave. Oh, my God. Oh, my gosh.
I'll let you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Be safe. Okay. All right, Bob, we'll go back to what you
And
were
that's-
saying. We got,
Yeah.
so Conservation Advisory Council is meeting when?
They're meeting on the 21st at 7 PM.
So I had a thought that we get this up in the President Street area about the leave
Mhm.
program. And I feel like the Conservation Advisory Council should probably take a look at that, what the observations were from the family who wrote I think it's a husband and a wife
Mhm.
separately, independently, and start having that conversation with the Conservation Advisory Council about the LEAF program. Because the time of year when it's picked up, the LEAF program actually ended up costing us, I think maybe $20,000 or $30,000 more this year than it did last year.
So far.
A lot more leaves were picked up, a lot more weight, a lot more yardage.
Right.
I think having that discussion with the CAC is vital to how we recommend going forward, what the village feels, the residents feel is, well, I think the majority feel is a vital program, but at least there would be an understanding of why it starts when it starts, why it ends when it ends, and what the charges are for. And also, how does it protect our infrastructure and it's not just a program that is cosmetic or aesthetic. It protects our storm drain systems
Sure.
from being clogged and stuff. So if
Okay.
you can bring them along and invite the family who
Mhm.
wrote in, for them to, and maybe even engage them to join the Conservation Advisory Council, see if they want to participate in
Sure.
that. Because it's a vocal family, right?
Mhm.
They bring in some
Yep.
good observations, and they can help,
Good.
okay?
Mhm.
Let's see. Is there something else? All right, we'll go to Trustee Hill.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everyone. The Public Safety Advisory Council met on Monday. We talked mostly about the things we had been talking about in December, but we had lighter attendance in December. So this time we kind of divvied out tasks on who's going to do what. So we're looking at updating or getting a new contract with the alert system. So right now we have people scoping out what other villages are doing, who they have, and what kind of alerts that they're sending out. And then we're also putting together a review of all the alerts that had gone out since we've had the last contract, so we have an idea of what truly is needed or not needed. And then we're also going to put together a updated who to call situation. So whether it's fire, police, code, if a tree is down, any sort of those sort of, if there's a
I think that's
water
a great
coming out of
idea.
the storm drain, or
Mhm.
kind of put together all those ideas, and then hopefully get it out at least in a digital format. But I know lots of municipalities do magnets for the refrigerator, and that might be a conversation based on cost. But that was also pre-social media, so always an option, but we can, once I think we have the document, we can figure it out from there.
All right, so Clerk Perillo, do you want to talk through the current status of OnSolve, which is the provider for our Port Jeff Alert, the current vendor that we're using?
So our contract actually expired, as you know, and we have, we've been granted a reprieve until tomorrow with OnSolve. We have found the OnSolve system to be challenging in terms of usage. I think we've discussed it. It is exceedingly difficult to use on the cell phone, and we have to have launch codes, so it makes it onerous. We need a launch code.
You need a red button.
Yeah, right, exactly. So it makes it onerous. OnSolve has been acquired by a larger company. That company is now looking into the entire system, how to improve. So they have offered, OnSolve has offered for us to have a tutorial of the system. Perhaps we can use the system more efficiently, but they have also provided data, which I asked for how many times we used it in 22, 23, 24, and what we used it for. I think the highest time was 5. I have all the data compiled. The highest number of times we used it was 5, always for weather-related events or flood, if I remember well. We have all that data. We also have other companies that are interested in providing us with similar services and competitive pricing.
So maybe we can just look to extend, not the service, but the discontinuation of the contract until we have enough data and information to actually make an informed decision.
I think it's reasonable, especially with the committee involved. So I have no problem sharing with you all the information that I have. So we can all be knowledgeable about it, especially in terms of what we've used it for in the past. Because if we go per occurrence, it turns out to be very expensive.
If we, so we're out of contract on this particular, with this vendor.
Correct.
Right?
Mhm.
So we're going to buy time to evaluate potentially other solutions and work with them to see what they can now provide, given they have a new owner.
Yes, but however, I've already been told that the portion that is most onerous to us, which involves the launch code, is remaining. They have no workaround for that at this time. Okay? They're
Okay.
looking at it as a safety measure so that not just anyone can send a message through the program, which is fair, but there
Yeah.
has to be an easier way. Others are not requiring launch codes.
I
All
think
right.
I
And,
don't think that's as much of a thing as they think it is.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking with the other vendors, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
may I be included in anything that has dollars and cents assigned to it? So once the committee has made a review, and perhaps I could be included in that dialogue.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And then our next meeting is February 3rd, I believe.
Quick question. If there's an abandoned car that's been sitting on the side of the road for a while, who do I alert in terms of that?
911.
911? Okay. Thanks.
Actually, the non-emergency number of
Yeah.
the sixth
Yeah,
precinct.
6th precinct. Yep.
I mean, our code enforcement officers can write violations for an expired registration, no license plate on the
Or
vehicle.
parking in a no standing
Yeah,
area.
parking
Okay.
violations, yeah. hmm
So maybe we start with
Mhm.
that before
Depending on what
troubling
that is, yeah.
Suffolk County.
It's registration, I think. I don't think we can write inspection. That used to be, but they removed it from the,
But if it's a
Yeah.
parking violation and it's sitting where it's not supposed to be sitting. Okay.
okay. Trustee Laux.
Most of this pertains to the Recreation Department. We've got a new senior club program that started today. We have over 90 seniors registered. These programs are going to run every Wednesday and Thursday. Pickleball is running at capacity up at Scraggy. Did you get in this year, Bob?
I am, but I'm not obviously playing today.
Okay.
And it's not Scraggy, it's at Spring Street.
Spring Street. With the demand for space, right now we're looking for other areas to run our programs. We're in conversations with the schools and a couple of other facilities that I'm not going to mention as of yet. We're really looking for spaces because we have the programs and we don't have the space to run them. And with regards to registering for some of these programs, our Rec Pro software program that we use for registration has been purchased by DaySmart, and the format is quite a bit different than Rec Pro. We're not right now up and running as of yet. We hope to have the process switched over quickly. And until then, if we have a problem, we're going to have to call the Village Center directly. Also, to go along with the new recreation registration system, we're in the process of creating a recreation booklet. I brought along one copy that I promised Fran I wouldn't let anyone look at right now because it's not complete, but this booklet is going to cover the entire year in terms of our programs, the times, what we're offering, so on and so forth. She's still got quite a bit of work to do on it, but I think it's going to be very helpful for our recreation programs. It's quite involved, and she still has quite a bit more to do on it. She made me promise not to make any marks on it.
Can I see that?
Absolutely. Just don't mark it up. Don't write on it. If you do,
Oh, this needs work.
needs a lot of work.
It's beautiful, actually.
It will be when she gets it all done. Again, I want to mention the demand for programs is dependent upon the availability of some of the facilities that we don't have that we're looking to possibly get. Presently, the Village Center is our main facility for most of our programs. Last month, the center had, believe it or not, 18,507 people walk through the front door. I know a lot of that was, the Dickens, but a lot of it is also the programs and specifically the skaters who come into the rinks. The rink occupies nearly 1/3 of our center, and to date has brought in $43,938 in revenue that I understand was not credited to revenue in the Recreation Department. It was? Good. At the last meeting of the Parks and Recreation Council, the council approved the preschool 2 to 3 year old skating program, but I read later on that that contract is that being written up yet, or?
Yes, it should be ready for our meeting on the 29th.
Great, super. I know it's early, but the Recreation Department is opening up interviews for summer jobs already. Parents with children who are interested in counseling or lifeguards, they're going to be starting interviews shortly, so they may want to contact the Village Center, get a head start on that. And lastly, the farmers market is going to start indoors on the 12th of January. They'll be on the first and second floor. Right now we have 23 vendors. The hours are going to be from 10 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. And that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for recreation?
I have a question for Bob. Bob, has anything been done about the no standing signs? Have we decided to?
I had a brief discussion with Steve about that, so
Yeah.
we're going to go back and take a
Okay.
look at it
Okay.
and see, and then, get a couple of ideas from him,
Yeah.
see where we can put those in.
Seems like the colder weather, things have gotten a little bit worse
Sure.
Where?
at the high school specifically.
Oh, around the
Yeah.
parking drop-off and pickup areas?
Yeah.
Well, that's something that the board would have to, we'd have to have a public hearing on that, and then, so I can't see that DPW would have any major objections to that, right?
No, I don't.
And the school district, okay with that?
Yes, very much so.
So, we'll talk to our village attorney about it, but Sylvia, is that something that we'd be able to do? Do we want to make a decision to notice that and start that process, or postpone it for another month? Looking for all recommendations. You guys have been the ones who have been talking about it, so you want to let us know when you have a chance to catch up?
Yeah, just looking at the calendar for, as far as what can be posted. I mean, I don't think it can be done for the 29th.
Well, are we proposing a code change?
It would have to
So
be.
if we're proposing a code change, we would have a resolution at the meeting on the 29th to have a public hearing at our February agenda meeting at the end of February.
So that would be the resolution. Yeah.
That would be the resolution, so we would do that in February. Is that something that we're interested in?
Yes, I think it is, so, and we can vote on it.
And we want it to be no stopping.
No standing?
What's more,
We'll let our attorney
I
weigh
think
in
no
on that.
stopping means you can't stand or park.
So,
That's
it's going to
something
be an
for
interesting
David.
public
Yeah.
hearing, I
Yeah,
can
let's
tell you
do
that.
So the proposed code change would be to change the portion of our code regarding no standing signs at a particular location,
Correct.
to change those signs to no stopping instead?
No, there's
no existing.
signs.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
Right now,
Or
there's
to
no
add,
signs
okay, so it's
there.
to add signage, and we don't know whether that signage is no stopping or no standing.
There's no signage there.
Right, we don't know whether it will be.
Yeah, what should it be?
No stopping or no standing,
Yeah.
we'll ask Attorney Moran.
And it
Okay.
is a conversation with the district, too, because it's going to impact their students and their families, big time. And what's the alternative? What's the solution? So do we, I don't know if we need to solve for that immediately, but there should be some pretty robust discussions with the district on that.
Yes. And the other recommendation that came back, I believe we have to wait until we conclude the negotiations with code, because that other recommendation was to have code officers there in the morning.
We don't have any code officers in the morning, so, yeah.
But that's the exact point that I've made.
And they're not traffic
like,
control
over and over again, right?
providers.
So
They
we
don't
have a
provide-
contract from code, which does not define what the village needs in terms of hours that are being satisfied.
Trustee, if
and
I
what-
may caution you.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you, thank you.
Oh, right, yes. Labor negotiations, got it.
Okay. So that was your question for Bob? All right, trustee Ugrinsky.
Okay, so we have, well, what I'd like to do is table most of my finance comments until after the treasurer has spoken, because he's really leading some of these things. But I will say that the Budget and Finance Committee, our first meeting is Thursday. It has been pushed to the 16th in order to accommodate our new auditors. We have the audit, version 1, I would call it, of a draft of audit results for fiscal year ending '24. And, they are now reviewing those. They are also in possession of feedback that the treasurer has provided. And the intent is to ensure that we have as definitive a work product as possible, given the expertise that the treasurer has supporting him. So the Budget and Finance Committee will be meeting every 2 weeks from this Thursday on, with the one exception of the shift of this week's. And so I'll pause there in terms of any other financial feedback or updates until the treasurer has provided his report. What I do want to also add, however, is that the Port Jefferson Power Plant Working Group has kicked off this week. We did a review of 2024, and just as a reminder, it was a relationship building year with Nat Grid, NYSERDA, LIPA. We're beginning to work our way through politicians in Albany who sit on the Energy Council. And as a reminder, we had been lobbying to be a hydrogen pilot site at the power plant. We'd been doing that with Nat Grid and NYSERDA. But we are still in the running for a production site following the pilot that will be completed in Northport. Right, and the reason for that was that there was a significant amount of open space away from overhead lines that they made a decision based on safety. That does not preclude this site in Port Jeff from being a production site. And this is a longer-term project, so it's likely that we're not going to see any kind of a decision on a production site, probably for maybe 4 or 5 years. But it's important that the village have a seat at the table. So for 2025, our goal as a group is to now also explore battery storage options, given there is, across all of the townships, we are being inundated by companies who are looking for sites to put battery storage. Many of those are very close to residential sites, and we are exploring the possibility that the power plant site would be a potential, a candidate for a battery storage system that would help remediate any wind farm fluctuations of electricity. I won't go into a lot of detail, but that is the goal for this year, to really look at, now that hydrogen is on the table and Port Jeff is a candidate for that, now we want to move to what is our nearest potential, and that would be battery storage. The second item I want to make people aware of is LIPA's Board of Directors meets on the 23rd at 11 o'clock, and I would like to represent the village in addressing the Board of Directors there. And so I ask for anybody's input. And, certainly as I put my remarks together, I'd like to float them to everybody for review.
I'd be open to review them. Thanks for taking that initiative.
I think it's important. Port Jeff has the opportunity to be, a poster child for the country on innovative approach to the energy transition, which we know is coming. It's a longer term. It's probably a 30-year plan, right? And perhaps we should consider including it in the village 30-year plan. Just a suggestion.
Sounds like a good one.
Well, we're limited in that we don't own that property, right? It's not our property,
But we're a partner.
but we are our tax revenue source, and we want to see them thrive and succeed to
Exactly.
continue with the revenue.
It
So-
is, and not speaking for LIPA or Nat Grid, it is not likely that that plant will shut down before 2030. And with, the energy transition, I personally feel that it is less than a 0%, or, I'm sorry, more than a 0% that plant will stay open, perhaps even more than 50%. So, but it will take some modernizing, and the reality is that National Grid is investing, as is LIPA, in the ongoing maintenance of those turbines. This is not an insignificant effort, and particularly given the temperatures, that peaker plant is operating.
Mhm.
So they turned it on yesterday, for example.
Mhm.
Anytime it gets really cold, we need it.
Or really hot.
Or really hot, that's right. Yeah,
Anytime it
it's the
peaks.
extremes
Mhm.
that it's there for. So,
Okay,
thank you. That's
it?
that's all I have
Okay.
on power.
So I'll go. I just want to touch on something, the relationships that are being built between some of these energy entities and have led us to be introduced to quite a few people who are interested in Port Jefferson as a partner, as a sort of a living laboratory partner. So particularly over at Stony Brook University. So I'm just jumping into this first because it's actually on the clerk's agenda for discussions today, but it is a request from actually a partner. We're being asked to prepare a letter of support as a potential local government partner in this particular project, which is funded by the National Science Foundation. It's a regional resilience innovation incubator, and the PI is George Gonzalez. The principal investigator is George Gonzalez at the State University of New York at Albany, but they are working with other institutions, including Stony Brook, and the title of the project is Collaborative Science for Community Flood Resilience in the Northeast. And so it's select funding by NSF. We're encouraging this because we, as a village, I'm actually asking the board to give me the authority to sign this letter of encouragement and support to the National Science Foundation, so that ultimately it aids in securing the project for this investigator in Albany, with connections to Stony Brook faculty and other institutions. So the letter's in the agenda. We'll go off process later when the clerk discusses it. But again, this contact came from Jim Aquaviva, who is one of the people that we've met in our tours of the Advanced Energy Center, looking at different ways and opportunities to help maintain the production of energy here in Port Jefferson at the power plant off of Beach Street. So however that is, whatever that looks like, but the relationships that we're building are also a great side effect, positive side effect, good collateral from these conversations.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I was remiss in not including Stony Brook University and the Advanced Energy Council in that. In fact, the power plant working group is going to be, as a group, going and paying a visit to them. And we're also planning on doing the same to look at the hydrogen fuel cells that are on the Northville property
I want to go to that one. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get you
So
looped in.
when you, do you have a date for that visit to the Advanced Energy Center?
I'm working with Mr. Saint Germain
Okay.
on that date.
Put a special request in to see if Esther Takeuchi can be there for that visit, because she is one of the top battery researchers in the world.
Right.
She has like she has like a gazillion.
She has the
patents
most patents of any person, I think, at this point, in that space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she'll be very informative about safety of battery storage, I think.
That's a great idea. Yeah, definitely will.
She is the a patent holder of the battery that is in the yes.
And hearing aids. The smallest hearing aids that now go in your ear, she did that.
Oh, I have to talk to her.
What'd you say?
Okay, on to building and planning. Just a couple of highlights from the director's report that I thought I'd call out. The Conifer 2 building, it remains in the existing landscape remains intact because we still have, there's condition approval was given by the planning board in May of last year. But there are still areas that need to be addressed and responded to by the developer. The building permit application requirements are not met yet. The staff is waiting for revised plans and an indication of outside agency compliance. And the staff is also awaiting a building permit application. So the funding is there for the demolition. Our grant writer has ensured that that's all intact. We're just waiting for the developer to pull up their end and waiting impatiently, in my view. Like, I'm not sure why we're waiting. So wanted to call that out. Zoning Board of Appeals is meeting on the 23rd. The Planning Board has a meeting tomorrow night. There's a few things on their agenda. Zoning Board of Appeals has 3 public hearings, 2 related to a proposed one vacant lot on Belterre Road and another proposal on Thompson Street. The Parking Committee is meeting next Thursday, the 16th, talking about various initiatives and concepts. So that's an open meeting. All are welcome. Whoever's interested is welcome to attend. I will be attending the annual economic survey results session on January 23rd. It's the 30th anniversary of this economic survey result, and it's hosted by contributing organizations are the county, the state controller, and the organization that does the survey. So the outcome of this presentation will be emerging trends in business and economy and the prospects thereof for Suffolk County. So it's an annual function, and I have never attended, so I'm really looking forward to attending because as we move forward with the economic opportunity task force that met last night, actually following the bid meeting, there seems to be some interest in looking at what prospectus does exist for Port Jefferson, what the impacts might be for Port Jefferson, and how we might be able to take some of those findings and apply them to Port Jefferson and retail and merchant exposure here. The other thing that the task force spoke of last night was developing a survey of sorts, a short one, to request of people who are walking through the village, uptown, downtown, in and about. It could be residents, it could be non-residents living in peripheral areas, it could be Stony Brook University campus people, it could be Mather Hospital, it could be St. Charles Hospital people, it could be the school district people who are, and people who work in the village, downtown, uptown, in the entire community. We want to hear from people what they feel they feel is missing or could be an opportunity for Port Jeff. And in addition to that, the planning department is doing some research, is about to embark on some research to really put together a plan, a template of a deck, a presentation that talks about what the village is, what the foot traffic looks like, how many people visit, what the ferry traffic looks like, just a full overview of the demographic of visitor in Port Jefferson that would inform prospects to make a decision to actually want to do business here. Something that really, data that provides them with a decision-making resource to say, okay, I get it now. The rumors are wrong. There is a lot of foot traffic in Port Jefferson. So, and this kind of proves it. So that's going to be a traveling roadshow for our planning department and potentially even and me as the mayor going around to meeting with folks and chambers and, organizations like the Long Island Association and the HIA, Hoppock Industrial Association, just business community representatives. So it's been a goal of mine for about over a year now, and I'm really looking forward to pulling it together with the task force and the help of the planning department. Let's see. So just a little update on grants. Legislator Engelbright found some funding for our Drowned Meadow Cottage Museum, $5,000. It's a county omnibus grant for the Museum and Historic Association related to the Drowned Meadow Cottage project. Grant funding will be used for the Culper Spy Day curator and docent services. So that's Mark Sternberg and Chris Ryan's services. So that's an extra $5,000 we didn't anticipate receiving. Just a little infrastructure update on the Drowned Meadow Cottage Museum property. There are those 4 stones that are coming out of the ground. They aren't anything related to. It looks like the stones of Inverness, kind of. So it's sort of like kind of cool, like travel in time. Yeah. Yes. But actually, what they are plugs to DEC, some sort of infrastructure that the DEC doesn't utilize anymore. So the DEC is moving them, taking them off the property and closing off those areas. At least 2. I'm not sure if it's all 4, but there are at least 2 that they're moving. We are still in discussions with trying to find a location for the storage shed for the 1776 whaleboat that LISEC is producing, the replica. And I think we're getting close to a location that makes sense. But until I have more information, I'm going to kind of keep that close to the chest. I don't want to overstep the discussions that I've had so far with that. But it's promising. It's exciting and promising. So just a couple of other updates on grants. With regards to FEMA, the hazard mitigation for flood reduction grant we're currently in our request for proposals stage. That deadline was extended to receive proposals to January 15th, so that's coming up next week.
Yes,
So we're excited for that, those bids to open, right?
yes.
Okay. We heard from the Tucker House Granting Agency, which is DASNY, Dormitory Authority of the State of New York. They just switched their contact that we've been working with, so that, according to our grant person, our administrator, seems to be a positive step, because I think we're getting closer and closer to DASNY issuing an executed contract for that, the acquisition of that house. Our grant writer was in contact with the Sellers Council, and so that's moving that forward a little bit. We'll put our village attorney in contact with their attorney. So, other developments, like newer things that we've been talking about and working on this new year, we're looking at possible funding opportunities through the second round of the Long Island Sound Resilience Planning Support Program for 2025. We met with Sea Grants, Elizabeth Hornstein today, and our engineering firm to discuss the option that we think is the most viable option right now. Again, once we know that to be the case, I'll bring a full update on that to this board. I don't, again, want to overstep the. I'm optimistic, but don't want to, I guess, jinx it. So, but it's not something new. It's something we've kind of discussed as a community before. So it's been proposed before. It's a good idea. We're just trying to now create a planning program out of what's been prepared and presented before and apply it to this particular planning grant opportunity. And then again, this is a new one as well. We were contacted by the Suffolk County Police Department in Yaphank to consider this opportunity for a local government efficiency grant. So with the Suffolk County legislator and the police department support, the village is looking to apply for funding to acquire license plate readers for various strategic locations in the village, which will help us strengthen our ability to deter and address crime in conjunction with Suffolk County Police, and improve traffic safety and support law enforcement efforts with advanced technology. That application is due January 24th. We were asked to collaborate with different municipalities. We had to collaborate with at least one municipality that was a village if we were going to pursue it at a certain level. And so we reached out to SCAVOA, Suffolk County Village Officials Organization, and sent a letter of solicitation seeking their interest, and the total amount that this grant will fund is $1.25 million, but the maximum amount per municipality, per village, is $250,000. So we did the math, and we figured out that we could get 5 villages involved, and minus us. So 4 villages in addition to us. And we got feedback from 4 other villages. So East Hampton, the village of East Hampton, the village of Southampton, the village of Bright Waters, and our neighbor in Belterre. So that's exciting. And like I said, the deadline for that is January 24th. So if we can get some license plate readers that are overseen by the county, the police department, that would be ideal. And yeah, that's my update. So Clerk Perillo, I'll look to, anybody questions?
Would it's not for speeding though, it's just for license plates that the police are looking for?
Enforcement type things.
Yeah,
He
okay.
said traffic. I'm not sure. Or will it at some point allow for that? Maybe. I don't know.
Gotcha.
Anybody else? Okay. Clerk Perillo.
Thank you, Mayor. So to begin, we have 6 resolutions that need to be taken out of process and voted on this evening. 3 of them are specific to clerk or other office, and 3 of them are specific to the treasurer's office. So with that, if we could please begin with resolution number 1, 10825. Resolution ratifying the hiring of Natalia Pashkin at an hourly wage rate of $18 per hour as a counselor for the Kids Night Out program at the Village of Port Jefferson Village Center, effective November 8th, 2024. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Take your pick.
I will. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Resolution number 2, 10825. Resolution authorizing Mayor Shepro to sign the attached letter of support on behalf of the Village of Port Jefferson in support of the proposed project entitled NSFR 212, Collaborative Science for Community Flood Resilience in the Northeast, as submitted by Dr. Jorge Gonzalez of the State University of New York at Albany. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Resolution number 3, 10825, resolution approving the request of the Business Improvement District to suspend metered parking throughout the Village of Port Jefferson during the Ice Festival on January 18th and 19th, with a rain date of January 25th and 26th. Excuse me, with rain dates of January 25th and 26th. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you.
Do we have a
Second?
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 Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Now we have 3 resolutions from the Treasurer's Office. Resolution number 4, 10825, resolution authorizing Treasurer Gafka to create a new capital line item to be known as H7197215, PJCC Capital Improvement to Maintenance Facility. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Discussion,
Oh,
good question
sure.
anyway.
Okay,
Where would this money come from?
it's in the next resolution.
Gotcha.
Am I right, Treasurer Gafka?
Yes.
Okay,
Gotcha.
okay.
Okay, so with that, we have resolution number 5, 10825, resolution
Do we
authorizing...
say, do we vote all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry.
Okay, all
My
right.
apologies. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Resolution authorizing Treasurer Gafka to perform attached budget transfer 22, funding the emergency replacement of a 500-gallon diesel tank at the PJCC maintenance facility in the amount of $29,500, detailed as follows. Decrease in CR 7989414, PJCC top dressing, in the amount of $2,000. Decrease in CR 7989417, PJCC sod, in the amount of $2,000. Decrease in 7989440, PJCC irrigation, in the amount of $6,000. Decrease in CR 7989450, PJCC aerification, in the amount of $5,000. Decrease in CR 7989461, tree pruning, in the amount of $2,500. Decrease in CR 7989472, course accessories, in the amount of $2,000. Decrease in CR 7989475, annual course improvements, in the amount of $10,000. Increase in CR 99509, interfund transfer, in the amount of $29,500. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Just discussion real quick.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask this
Yeah,
question?
so it's not a question, it's more of an observation. So what you're seeing here, and the reason there's so many items here, is that the treasurer has worked with the general manager over at the country club to review, every spot that we can take money from in
And the
order
superintendent.
to not have a deficit, right?
Mhm.
So I just want to explain all of the bureaucracy here, as it might be, seen as rather detailed, but it's important.
And to that, I'll add, the reason what's being purchased hasn't been discussed. So I will read off of the general manager's report, discussing a recent inspection, unannounced, of Suffolk County Department of Health Services on December 4th, that led to 4 violations of the fuel tanks and chemical storage facility. 3 of the violations were for not recording monthly inspections for all 3 tanks in the preferred method of documentation, which is immediately corrected, but records were kept by the superintendent and his staff meticulously in a separate documented, like a notebook. But what they were told now that there is a form that they need to complete for monthly inspections. And then the 4th violation was for the diesel tank. And there are integrity issues with the secondary containment system due to corrosion. The tank is 25 years old, and it cannot be patched. It had been patched in the past. The country club is actively soliciting bids from qualified contractors. There might be an update on that for tank replacement, and we'll provide regular updates on the process. But do you have any updates on that, Treasurer Gafka?
And speaking with the superintendent and GM, we haven't gotten formal numbers, but we're moving forward with this as an emergency purchase. We have one very good quote that the Suffolk County Department has said has done this activity in the past. Public safety and health and welfare, we don't want anything to go wrong with the diesel tank, so that's why this is on the agenda.
Okay. Any further discussion, questions?
I just want to point out this is an environmental, so it's really important. But the other thing that it highlights for me is, it just really pushes to the forefront the fact that when we go to budget for next year with the GM, there's got to be a contingency fund that is begun so that we can cover things like this in the future.
Yep.
Do we let the Board of Governors and the CCMAC know that this needs to be done?
I would say that the the CCMAC should absolutely be informed that this is happening. The Board of Governors, as an advisory body to the GM, should probably be informed, but this wouldn't fall under their purview.
I actually think I wrote to the general manager to advise him to advise them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know for sure if he did, but I'm remembering that I said you need to let them know.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah, it wouldn't,
It's an
Trustee
emergency,
Christie said, it's an
so
emergency, we have to do it, but
communication
it's always
is
good
a
to
big
just let
thing.
people know that there's an emergency and we have to
Yeah.
do it.
yeah.
Sure.
Yes, Stephen, how are you going to address this going forward? What kind of a line are we putting in? Where's the money going to come from?
I think the best way to address this, as with all of the capital infrastructure for all of the facilities, is to have a comprehensive plan, which I know the GM has been tasked with coming up with the narrative for the capital up there at the country club. And this is certainly one of those areas that would need to be addressed and looked at to have a long-term plan for any potential future replacements that may be necessary.
And what's going to happen if this replacement comes in above 29,500?
There is no expectation that this particular replacement will go above that number.
Okay.
This is an all-inclusive number from the company that gave it.
Okay.
Okay. Questions exhausted? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Resolution number 6, 10825, resolution authorizing Treasurer Gafka to perform attached budget amendment 75, increasing anticipated revenue for line item H5031 interfund transfer in the amount of $29,500 and increasing appropriations for line item H71972215 PJCC capital improvement to maintenance facility in the amount of $29,500. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to just briefly hit some points on my report and add a couple. Thank you. Grants, we had an internal meeting on the 30th of December with myself, the treasurer, our grants administrator, and DPW regarding the FEMA/dishes grant. which is, I'm sorry, grant for the event of the 18th and 19th of August. Following that, there was our first meeting with FEMA/Dishes. This was a prep meeting. We had our first meeting this past Monday, and at this time, the clock will begin to tick. So at some point in March, we will be finalizing. But we have compiled a vast majority of the data that's required, including photographs and statements and invoices. So it's been a heavy lift, but we are happy to do it because it will potentially be a very good outcome, we're hoping, for the village in terms of the damages that were done. We received a resignation from our senior planner. So the process has already taken place for replacement. We will regretfully accept that at our meeting on the 29th. Letters have already been sent per civil service procedure to those on the existing list. And we will canvass the list. Andy Freeling and I, as is the norm, will be interviewing potential candidates. In terms of employment as well, an advertisement was placed on Indeed today for a summer camp director. And that person will be needed from June 30th through August 15th. The pay rate is $22 to $25 per hour, dependent upon qualifications commensurate with those. In addition to my report is DPW item that arose out of our Monday department head meeting, which is that we'll have another resolution on our agenda meeting regarding items to be surplused, which are vehicles and a number of big belly solar compactors, which are no longer useful for our purposes. And last but not least, we have an election upcoming on the 17th of June. There will be an open mayoral position, 2 open trustee positions, and 1 open judgeship position. There will be a resolution for approval of the engagement letter with Stephen Martyr of Be Ready, which is the same firm that represented last year, and they have held the same pricing as last year as well. So the process will begin. There will be notifications as required in the newspaper, and we will ask Suffolk County Board of Elections for a list of qualified inspectors, and many of the inspectors that we used last year would like to return, and those were from the list as well. So again, that process has begun. And that concludes my report.
I just have one more add-on. Parks DPW kind of combined issue came up last night at the bid meeting. There's been some observation that the decorations that are currently being hung year after year are taking, they're kind of becoming long in the tooth, I guess, and are losing their effectiveness. And we're getting some information from the bid on a vendor that might be able to get us more bang for our buck, similar to the flowers that we're ordering for the spring and summer, which our Parks and Public Works are working on right now. We're going directly to a wholesale nursery versus buying retail, and so we're going to get a lot more bang for our buck there too. So anyway, I mentioned to the superintendent today that when they're starting to take down the decorations now, and when they do, if they could sort of inventory which ones could make it through another year or 2 years, and those that cannot, we can start replacing them on an annual basis, but not all at once, over time.
Mayor, contact information for One Resource was received already today from the bid.
Oh, good.
And relayed to DPW.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Last and not least.
Yeah, before we go to that,
Yes.
DPW, it just reminded me that I've been getting some inquiries from folks asking about the kayak program. and you know, what happens to kayaks that are not picked up?
We're going to have this conversation again.
Okay. So
It's good with me.
Con-
Where do we
conversation
stand?
is now tabled.
It's
Yes,
no,
thank you.
no.
No, I mean temporarily?
No, we could talk about, like, what, there was a decision, right?
Oh,
There,
okay.
there has been some
There-
resolution to what,
There was a decision that we will provide for auction the kayaks that are not picked up. And after such time, we gave our residents one more opportunity via some kind of written notification. Sometimes it's an email. Two kayaks were retrieved
Uh-huh.
from that, so now I'm waiting for
good.
the updated list.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
all right, Treasurer Gafka.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I get into the majority of my report, I wanted to respond to Trustee Laux regarding the skating rink revenue. One of the new things that I'm providing in my report, I've done it the last couple months, is I have all the expense and revenue reports through the month immediately preceding the meeting. And in one of those line items is the skating rink revenue, and it's in December we brought in $32,700 that was booked to that line item, which is A2089, which you can find, and I'll make sure it continues to get posted to the skating rink revenue as it comes in. Moving on to my report, we received the completed package from Suffolk Paving regarding the Phase 2 that was funded with Suffolk County Water Authority contributions. So that will be a significant payment that will be going out this month. You'll see that on the abstract when that gets circulated. So thanks again, to Suffolk County Water Authority for that contribution and for the very positive update for those roads. I'm still working with our fixed asset vendor to get them additional information going back and forth to make sure that that report is finalized by the end of this fiscal year so that we can get the material weakness that has been on our financials for the last 10 years off and never to come back again once that process is put in place. As Trustee Ugrinsky has mentioned, the draft financials, they're in draft form. They were circulated to the Budget and Finance Committee. I've begun the review of them and gone back and forth with the audit firm regarding some of the language that's in the what we call the management discussion and analysis, which is kind of how they present the financials. The numbers are the numbers, but how they're presented is important to make sure that all the appropriate context is in there. So all of that is being provided to the Budget and Finance Committee, and I look forward to their particular review of the financials and then working to have a final financial report by the end of this month. So all of that is in discussions, and I will update the board as that comes along. Want to talk about parking meters. This wasn't in my report because I actually had a webinar yesterday with the company 11X. This is a recommendation from the Parking Committee in the bid regarding remote parking sensors. We're calling them pucks, so to speak, that go in individual parking spaces, that the hope is to utilize them in the Chase lot to help with that once that MOU gets underway. They had provided a quote about a year ago when it was first being researched, about $13,000, $9,000 of which was installation and software costs one time, and then a yearly cost of around $4,000 for the subscription to the software and the maintenance of the individual sensors. One of the things that they did not include, I found out, was installation. We didn't request an installation cost. There will likely, if our staff can't do it, we would need an outside vendor to install them. So I'm looking for an updated quote, which I'll share with the Parking Committee, with Andy Freeling and the rest of the board once I have that. What's cool about what those particular sensors do is it provides you occupancy data. It actually is already integrated with all of our vendors that we already have, United Public Safety, Honk Mobile. So there is, if it works, there is potential to explore longer term, maybe in other areas to help with our managed parking program. So if anybody has any questions on that, feel free to reach out to me and I'll share with whatever I have. on that information. The budget, we're going into budget season, working with staff, and it's going to be coming by the end of this week. What we're going to be doing is looking at all of our expense lines, seeing where we have opportunities to cut back on expenses, to also work for the fiscal 2026 budget to see how we can keep the budget, the increases as little as possible moving forward into the future. One of the things that I got excited about, I actually, right before this meeting, I figured out one of the problems we've had with our software is that we've had to manually input all of the data into the software to do the budget. And while that doesn't sound like, well, what's the big deal about that? It can be really onerous when you could work off of an Excel sheet and input and change and add line items and try and get the budget to a more comprehensive so that the data is it's not vague. It's all right there and described as to what we're spending our money on. But I figured out that we hadn't set up our software right. And I went in and I was able to, on the training side, work on the background to change a couple system parameters that now I can export this budget to an Excel and we can actually change this data and work in an Excel sheet, which I know Trustee Ugrinsky is one of the recommendations from Budget and Finance was that we do just that. So that is something that we can be able to do, and I just found out today that we can actually get it to work right.
May I just add something to that?
Sure.
So why is that important? Because we have not historically been able to do monthly variance reporting that comes right out of the system. Okay, why is that? Because in the way that the budgeting or the admins, which is our single version of the truth as a municipality, was set up, we entered the budget as just an annual number. So while we could look at what our year-to-date versus our annual budget was, we could never look at year-to-date actuals versus year-to-date budget. And that analysis and being able to report that on a monthly basis is core to being able to hold, to hold conversations with, say, department heads or with the treasurer in terms of where we are. Are we running over? And when you don't have that, what typically will happen is that you get to the end of the fiscal, and that's when everybody finds out that they went 50,000 or 100,000 or 250,000 over budget. So, this greatly improves or will greatly improve our ability to do that kind of monthly reporting that is going to inform everybody on how to be accountable for their own budgets.
Is that why you had champagne in the office today? I was not sure.
I wish there was champagne. My staff was a little alarmed at how excited I was about a couple little button pushes, but
this is called finance geekiness. Yeah. I'm excited.
I am excited too.
So, yeah, I mean, to Trustee Ugrinsky's point, the month-to-month data, what that will do is show us where we are in our budget and like as of January compared to last year, and if we're exceeding our expectations and where we need to slow down.
Line by line.
Right. And we can also put in one-time costs in specific months so that you really get good data that way.
Yeah.
So this should be very helpful for the board and for the public at large moving forward. One other thing about the country club is that
And just to add to that, the departments
yes,
who we are
yes,
asking to really manage their own budgets.
Right.
correct.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, Mayor. Going into that and along with that point, had some discussions with the country club staff and management staff about having the procurement aspect that has been handled primarily by the deputy treasurer start to shift back over to the country club and give them access to the procurement tools, much like DPW has their public works officer that inputs all of their vouchers and POs, have that shifted back over to the country club in a slow manner so that they can get used to it, but so that they can have some more control over their purchasing. They can put in their own purchase orders, do their own vouchers, begin to look at their budget and know, without having to ask, they can have their own staff produce those reports, and they can be a little bit more on top of their purchasing. And it should help with the accountability and making sure that that doesn't fall back, by the wayside. So we're going to be working closely with them on that transition. So that's another positive thing, which will help free up the deputy treasurer to do some more of the analytic requirements that we need from the treasurer's office, and not just have this data input be such a bog on staff. Talking about, I added a couple new things since we have a grant writer now that's producing a report. I can produce some more information that's, my grant report was 1.5 pages long, so that I don't need to do that anymore. Significant collections. We received a $104,000 permit fee from Mather, a renewal fee. So that was something we weren't expecting this year, so that's a helpful for the budget, when we get to the end of the year, possibly getting to our revenue number, exceeding it, or, just managing the budget better.
And what was that for?
It was a renewal, building permit renewal fee.
Okay.
We received our pilot payment from the town of Brookhaven from LIPA. So LIPA they have to pay a pilot payment to the town, which needs to be based off a percentage of what their equipment, their poles, their wires, all of that infrastructure. And then we get a percentage of that. So it went up about $2,000 over last year. So we got about $319,000. That wasn't expected revenue, but we did receive it. We got our CHIPS reimbursement on the 17th of December. So that was good for the full amount. They gave us everything we asked for. And as soon as I have a new CHIPS number, we'll start working on the next year's paving program. We did get our insurance recovery payment from the totaled Ford F-250, the 2011. So that will go towards the cost. It'll be partially deferred for next year and go to the cost of the monthly payment of the new Ford F-250 that we got with the plow package. And we did pay our yearly retirement bill, which is just under $600,000, which was like a 20% increase over last year. Hopefully it won't go up that much next year, but, and that's it. So if there's any other questions.
You reminded me of something related to a new policy that we've been talking about, the vehicle use policy. So for some reason, the Village of Port Jefferson doesn't have an existing vehicle use policy or take-home policy. Not familiar with that, right? Do you know where it is? So there's no record of any of it. If there is, let's find it. But we have it. It's in draft format now.
Yes.
I don't know that we required anybody to sign off on anything, including code enforcement or anybody for using a vehicle
Right. It
that I've seen. I don't know if in your experience, if that was the case, did code sign off on vehicle use policy? And
Well, it just been the co-chief. No, as a matter of fact, co-chief didn't. No, he did. Co-chief did take the car home. It was just co-chief and DPW were the only people that took their vehicle home.
I think
It
there are
was-
4 take-home vehicles right now. But there are also vehicles that our staff uses that
correct.
still require. So
Right.
take-home is one
Right.
aspect.
Yeah, I know we had something for take home.
Yeah.
Well,
In any case, I'm sure would need to be updated.
Exactly. I'm sure.
So there was a collaboration with all department heads, and everyone had input. So now the draft is in finalization stage.
so hopefully we can ratify it on, or we can resolve it
On the 29th.
to be adopted at the meeting at the end of the month.
Yes.
So we can feel free to let people take vehicles home so they know what their obligations and responsibilities are, and et cetera, et cetera. Not that anyone's abusing it, but we just need to, I think it's best practice.
What are the 4 vehicles that are people taking home?
I don't know, it's a list somewhere.
4? Okay, that seems. said, I always knew we had two. I didn't. Okay.
Maybe it's 3.
But are you still taking the Cadillac home?
I can't get the keys away from you, Stan. Okay. Yeah, that's good. I think we'll see that on the agenda at the end of the month. And, yes?
I'm sorry, before I forget, I had it written down and I just remembered. There will be a resolution on the agenda for the 29th regarding setting the budget hearing in April.
Okay.
The way the dates lined up, and I need to speak with the clerk, is I believe, I'd leave it actually up to the Board of Trustees to decide if they want to do it this way. Last year, we had it at the work session, so it would be the second, it needs to be done by the 15th of April. So our work session's the 9th of April, so we could have the public hearing on the tentative budget on the 9th, and then the 30th would be the regular meeting, and that is the absolute last day that we can adopt the budget.
So I'm going to suggest that you put that timeline, work backwards from the date certain, put that timeline that we've seen, enable the other trustees to take a look at it, know what to expect, when they'll be looking at what, and when the auditors will present their findings to us, at what meeting that will take place for the 2023-24 budget,
2024, the audit, yes.
the audit.
Yeah.
And so there's the audit, and then there's the budget process. So those two are sort of coinciding, so it would be helpful for everybody to understand and keep expectations and anticipation as an understanding versus a surprise.
Absolutely, and what the mayor's referring to is that there's my office has an internal document for a timeline for how the budget gets produced, which I'm going to share. I'll share with the entire board, so that everybody can keep that in line with what to expect.
One of the expectations is that the trustee liaison to the department participate in the planning of the budget process. That's on the timeline, right?
I don't know if that's on the timeline, but that is certainly a best practice. It can be
Yeah.
added to the timeline.
I think it's important to also note, it's not just two processes, right? There's another one that no one's talking about, and that is going through all of the revenues that were budgeted and determining where we are year-to-date, obviously, with the coming budget and our future use of the system. This is going to be a lot easier to produce, so it's a
Yeah.
heavily manual effort now.
Yeah.
But it involves all of the departments and looking at various revenue shortfalls and figuring out in the next 5 months how we're going to address those. So I would expect that sometime in the near future, we're going to have that report that we can, review.
Very near future?
Yes, I have something that I produced by Tuesday that was being vetted by my staff for projected payroll and so on and so forth. So
Okay, great.
there is that analysis is
Okay.
happening.
Yeah. But this is an important first step to getting the budget right.
I just want the liaisons to know that they are welcome to participate, engage, and be part of the process for budgeting in the departments that you are working with.
Not just welcome, I would ask.
I'm demanding
As the
it.
Commissioner of Finance, I would ask that everybody sort of work with their departments, once that information comes out, to figure out how to address any revenue shortfalls, and also to, get involved with the budget process, because, for example, Trustee Laux, Trustee Giuliano, you guys have a ton of institutional knowledge that you can bring to this process. And, now that we're really looking at achieving best practices, it would be invaluable for us to be able to leverage that institutional knowledge.
Maybe.
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 Of course it would. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Anything else? All right. think we lost our attorney, but I think we still have executive session items to go through.
We do.
I
Okay.
have something I'd like to, a question about the last meeting we had where we tabled a portion of the country club fees for junior members. I'd like to know exactly where we are with that right now.
I don't remember it as being tabled. I remember the resolution wording was accepting the fees with the exception of the juniors. So I don't remember that being a tabling.
Well, what it basically means is that we did not approve the junior membership rates at the last meeting.
What it meant was that the board did not approve the rates for the juniors as proposed, but all other rates were approved.
Correct.
The assumption being that the rates would remain the same was my understanding.
Okay, that's not the assumption I had. I thought we would discuss it at a later date. And maybe
It doesn't mean it
maybe our
can't be
motion should have said
discussed.
that, yeah.
Doesn't mean it can't be discussed, but that's how I remember the motion.
The village
Because we-
attorney advised that in the way that it was phrased at the meeting, that it would suffice if the rates remained the same. We didn't need a resolution or discussion because there was no recommended rate change coming out of that meeting or vote. So, and it's better if he sort of speaks for himself, but
So can we, when council is available again, maybe just ask the question? I mean, even if it's a formality, just to say,
provide an opinion.
vote on it and say, no, I mean, if we're keeping them the same, then let's vote on it, right?
Let's vote on it separately.
And just formalize
Yeah,
it, Seems like an easy vote to do, no?
Is-
You keep looking at me.
What do you think, Stan?
What do you want
Because
from me?
I
don't
want to
want
wait
anything from you.
for
I
Attorney
just-
Moran.
Absolutely.
So
I
I'm
just
I'm just going to
didn't- I was
defer
going to ask if that
to the
sufficed.
attorney. I'm going to defer to counsel, because that was how,
Separate from the fees and the membership rate or the total package of costs, weren't we also, it was my assumption, I guess we maybe all be wrong, that we were tabling any policy changes to the membership too, so like the tea times and the cart fee, because I know that was one. There's a new policy that prohibits members without a license from taking out a cart, but then there's also mandatory cart fees, and we hadn't ironed out that wrinkle yet.
there was no change to the junior rates or policies from 2024.
The junior policies are in what we call the white book that usually was distributed to every member at the country club. Juniors under the age of 16 are never allowed to use a cart. Juniors 16 and older need a driver's license to operate a cart. During the months of June, July, and August, when carts are mandatory, the juniors under 16 do not have to pay when they play. That would be, since they can't take a cart anyway, they don't have to pay. Those rules are all there. I don't know if they've been.
Well, I just think, if I remember, maybe I'm wrong, but I do think that was included in that write-up that we had at the meeting at the end of last year, that you would have to pay the cart fee. Either way, it sounds like there's a consensus to not have, I don't want to speak for everyone, but it does sound like more or less we're in agreement that
Yeah,
we
this is
shouldn't
why I would like
prohibit, but
to
also require.
discuss that and put that in, set it in stone.
Yeah, and I know there's also concern with use of the app too for setting or booking your tea time. And I think in the proposal it said junior members had to
For the
call.
juniors, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I'm going to defer to legal counsel because my understanding is by not addressing any of the junior proposals, it defaulted to the 2024. If we don't vote on it, it defaults to the 2024 understandings of policies and pricing. It's a default, but again, I'll
But
let.
I still think there's some things that need to be cleaned up in terms of the juniors with carts and tea times and what days they can play and all
Are you
has to
saying
be-
it's different, or we just want to codify it?
Yeah, I think it should be out there. I think there's a lot of people that don't realize.
Okay.
Well, a notification went out to all families with juniors, all people who, I think there were 33 of them or something like that, indicating that the rates and the policies that were applied in 2024 were unchanged from the board meeting, and that was how they would sign up. Now, if you want to go and do something different, Stan, I would
No, it's
take
not
it to the
different.
ground.
It's not-
I would go out to the field and do what you think is right. Bring the recommendation where you think it belongs. To bring new
Well, for example, do you know when juniors can play?
juniors can play based on playing times in 2024 is 10 o'clock Monday through Friday and after 2 o'clock on Saturday and
And
Sunday.
that is not the rule.
What
The
rule?
juniors can play Monday through Thursday anytime, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Whatever was in the book.
Yeah.
If I
That's what I'm
recited
saying.
it
We gotta-
incorrectly, then whatever was in the policy from last
Right.
year, the policy remained intact from 2024. So no change. I can't recite exactly what was, my understanding was that, but if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It's whatever the policy was in 2024 remains the same for 2025.
And look, part of the reason that we're keeping it the same, and I'm just adding to this because I wound up in some of the BOG conversations, Board of Governors conversations, and in conversation with the GM, and as you guys probably know, I went out on social media and said, parents, let's feedback, right? But the appropriate vehicle for feedback is to email the GM with copy to the clerk. And we received a ton of feedback. And that feedback is actually why, the juniors is remaining as it was. So, I just want to highlight the fact that we opened it up for resident feedback.
Mm-hmm.
We've incorporated it, and we're reacting to it. So, I just think that's important for everybody to know. In case they missed my Facebook page post. So, yeah.
Okay, do we have a motion to go into an executive session?
To discuss a contract negotiation and the specific performance of a particular employee at 7:13 PM. Motion?
Motion?
Second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.